Okay, back from break. Welcome, Sharron.
Thank you, Adam.
Lovely to be back.
Did you have a good break?
I had a great break, a good break that someone with 3 young children can have. So, it was exciting. That's a great way to describe it. How was yours?
Probably the opposite. I had a great break. Super relaxing, friends, family, eating, drinking way too much.
Yeah.
Have come back with the new year on a bit of a reset.
Whoa.
Yeah, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Oh, how did you bring that together? Crazy.
Oh, really clever.
Love it. So talk us through it. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, I think that we ended last year talking about the importance of planning and what that looks like for businesses. And we probably did that successfully with a number of our clients.
Mm-hmm.
So today I really wanted us to talk about the importance of the reset in the new year. Mm-hmm. And so if you didn't do that for last year, why it's such a good time to do it this year, and having successfully done it multiple times over with our clients just recently.
And with ourselves.
Which we'll talk about in the next episode. Today's all about really why that's so important for a business to reset.
And I suppose it's not just, everyone just goes, oh, reset is one action. It's not. It's how do you reset it properly and then execute it and have the discipline to carry what you've talked about, or the tasks or whatever the reset is, and the discipline to actually make that implemented into your business, which, inevitably is the hardest part always.
Yeah, and I think that when we talk about the reset and why it matters, it's because many businesses and owners of businesses come into the new year feeling a fair amount of weight from the previous year, whether that's unresolved decisions haven't been made or conversations that they should have had that they haven't had. It's actually drawing all of that in so we can go, okay, it's not necessarily about a new plan. It's just about the reset of where we are, and that could be emotionally, it could be operationally, it could be strategically. It's drawing a line in the sand to go, let's just spend some time. I talk about let's pause for half a second before we then go and execute.
And I think it's interesting. We sort of, a lot of businesses, we talk about the difference between the financial year and the calendar year, and why we always do our reset at the calendar year after after everyone's had a bit of a break and stuff like that. But also gives you a lot of the KPIs and the measurements are taken from financial year to financial year, particularly around the profitability and the revenue and all those kind of things. But the reality is it also gives you a 6-month financial year reset in order to go, are we anywhere near where we said we were going to be? Yeah. And it goes, what do we need to do differently? What do we need to keep? I mean, we talk about the old keep, stop, start, or
stop, start, continue.
Stop, start, continue, or whatever it is that I never get right. But I go, it's a good time that everyone's refreshed, but it's also a good time to check in about the things we set out sort of 6 months ago as well.
Yeah, and I think it really re-energizes the business, and it's not an easy session to have. No. And having just come off the back of a number of them, there's really challenging conversations that are had because we're not just looking back at all the things that we did well.
Yep.
A lot of the conversation is about what did I not do that I should have done last year? What did I tolerate that perhaps I shouldn't have? And really be sort of the reset goes along with all of that. So it's not all just this is a great conversation and, it's a bit of a discussion point. It's actually some hard truths that come out of that to go, if we're genuine about wanting to reset where this business is at, we actually have to be honest about what we did and didn't do last year.
And I think that there's an interesting scenario, which is you're probably in a different league to me, but not shying away from those, not shying away in some areas, not shying away from having those challenging conversations, or being pretty brutally honest with yourself and being like, I said I was going to do this, I didn't, or this is not working, but I'm too afraid to have that conversation. And this gives you when you do a reset, it gives you a chance or an opportunity to bring them out in the environment that says it's open enough, but you can have those challenging conversations. And and we could all point back to whether it be in our own businesses or businesses that we consult with, not having some of those difficult conversations, it just snowballs. Is that a word? Snowballs, that's the one. It just snowballs, and then it becomes a major issue, and then you actually have to deal with it in a really different way.
Yeah, and I think that we talk a lot about trust, and we're not going into that today, but a company that builds a foundation of great trust creates the ability to be honest in those conversations and a little bit vulnerable about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I probably go on about this all the time, and I think it's an underrated part of any business is that fundamental trust piece, because that's what enables you to have those honest conversations, put on the table what needs to be said in a respectful way that enables the business to then really push forward. So I think the trust element, the honest conversation, and what that enables a business to do in that reset is to create clarity.
Yeah.
And I often talk about this with the owners of businesses. I mean, there's a lot of things that we go, that's the number one thing. There's a lot of those things. I'm not going to say it's the number one thing, but I go, an owner that has the ability to create clarity for its team is gold. And I almost say it's a generosity of a business owner to be that generous that it creates the clarity that everyone's really clear on expectations. It's a game changer.
So I suppose we always get, and we need from all our clients, right? We need a strategy for this year. Every business owner ever, and I go, what is when that sort of comes to that type of scenario, and you start to slow it down, you start to unpack. There's exhaustion, there's fatigue, avoidance of the hard conversations, and I go, what does that, what does that actually look like, and how do you tackle that when it's, everyone's got I was going to say something really can't be bothered, the can't be bothered attitude, or they're sort of just, they've come off a really big break and they're just sort of winding up. Maybe everything's not perfect to have a actual reset and have some of those conversations.
I think, and I mean, literally had a conversation with a client yesterday, and I'd spent some time with the senior leadership team without the owners of the business, and this particular owner moves really quickly, and the team probably can't quite keep up, and he's wondering why aren't we moving fast enough, and part of it is that exhaustion piece. People need some time to breathe. And if we can't find a moment in time to breathe and actually embed some of the decisions that have been made, it does create that exhaustion. So, but the reality is some businesses have to keep moving quickly. So I think sometimes this reset is about breathing, taking the time. It doesn't mean that you can change necessarily all of that, but at least it gives you the ability to go, let's reset, and let's look at what the priorities are, and let's almost get the energy and the motivation to start again, because you have to keep going.
And I suppose sometimes that's what the reset and the redefinition, or bringing everyone back to what that's supposed to look like. That gives the motivation and that gives the energy. And coming back and looking down the barrel of another 6 to 12 months, going can't be bothered, or it's hard. It was really hard last year, or whatever. The actual stop and the pause that that we talk about is really a chance for us to go, well, hang on a minute here. We've done all these things. We did some, well, we did some terribly. Let's just kind of bring that back into focus, and that's how we're going to push forward. And that focus is what generally we see drives energy.
Yeah. So when we talk about, what does a real reset actually look like? And I think I touched on this before, it involves honest conversations.
Yeah.
And they can be tough, and I'll give a real life example in a later part of this episode. But we talk about sort of 3 things that we really focus on in this reset. We go first that we talk about the owner and the leader of the business. They tend to carry the weight. So it's about going, what can we almost take off the shoulders there that others can be doing in the business to give them the ability to think visionary and laterally. And so we always start with the owner. What do they need?
Yeah. And I suppose the owner has, or owners, I should say, they have a whole different set of not issues, but pressures that sometimes the business sees, but sometimes the business doesn't see, and sometimes the business shouldn't see either.
Agree.
That whole analogy of it's lonely at the top. I've thought about how I feel about that comment, having led businesses and owned businesses, and you're the same. And I go, it's lonely up until much as a point where there are some things as a business owner, and I advocate for this, as that you just need to get on and do it, right? It's no one else's responsibility and it's no one else's accountability but your own.
Yep.
That's really challenging, right? Because apart from, obviously if you have, some help like Juno or whatever you want to do like that, but you go, it's not lonely. It's just challenging because you've got no one to bounce back on, and you just have to dig deeper and keep moving forward. And you go, the pressure of that and the pressure of the bigger you get, the more pressure you have, right? Because the more mouths you're feeding, sort of so on and so forth. And you go, and I'll talk for myself here, I can't afford to be exhausted, right? I got too much riding on the success of that. And so you just kind of keep going. It's a challenging thing because I look at it and I say there really is no other option. You either move forward or you don't. And if you don't move forward, that's a really challenging conversation.
And I think that's why, Juno as a business comes into its own, because we often talk about owners of businesses where it is lonely and they really need that objective piece.
Correct.
And that's where we come into play here, because that's what we deliver is the ability, one, to reset, pause, and actually talk about you as the owner and those challenges. So that's where we start. The second thing we focus on is the business itself. We and I'll use a real life example. Just recently, have 2 whiteboards running about. We look at the business and the success of the business last year. What did we do really well? And then we have the other board about what did we not nail. What did we not hold ourselves accountable to? Where did we let the standards sort of drift? And it's interesting when we do that work, and the board of remembering and recognising success always seems to be really challenging, and we end up with 1 or 2 things on that board, and then the other side just gets full, which, they're the areas that we want to work on, but I think it's always really important for a business to recognise both.
Yeah.
And sometimes businesses lose sight of what they did do really well, and it's rare that businesses haven't done something really well. So we sort of start with that and around what are the things that the business has done well and not so well. It's part of that reset.
Do you think that having said that and having done many of these resets, it's the focus on what's not working clouds the path to sort of grow through that, if that kind of makes sense. Because I've never seen I think that there's we'll talk about the team in 2 seconds, which is your third one. But I go, in order to get the team engaged and progressing and moving forward and moving towards a plan, you can't just talk about all the things that didn't go right? You have to have positivity, because I go, why would you be working there if it's just we haven't done this, we haven't done this, we haven't done this, we haven't done this, we failed at these 5 things. So, okay, well, what are we doing? Like there's a real kind of, and that's one of these challenges, right, when you do have a challenging year or a challenging 6 months, is that, yes, you have to acknowledge and have tough conversations, but you also have to find the things that you did well. Yep. Otherwise, your team's going to be sitting there going, well, I did such a bad job, I worked my ass off, and what am I doing here? So it's that kind of balance of as the leader of a business and as the business itself. Totally agree, because the negatives always on the whiteboard are far more than the positives, but you have to find positives, and there are. You're just not looking for them.
Yeah. Or you've forgotten about them.
Yeah, correct.
And then the third thing we really focus on, to your point, is about the team. So we really sort of unpack where is the team been positioned throughout the year, the good, the bad and the ugly. It takes that team to be thriving in order to really make progress. Yeah. And so we spend some time making sure that there is clarity around what that team is, the expectations of that team. Do they understand what they look like? And invariably, they all cross over. When Correct. We're talking about the owner and the leaders, when we're talking about the business itself, and when we're talking about the team, they're all intertwined.
Yeah, and I had it's an interesting point on that, because I had a recent meeting that I sort of sat in on, and we were talking about the team and the difference between, I suppose, growth and opportunity and new client opportunity, and generating opportunity from existing clients. And the data points that we sort of started with, we go, it all seems like it's working, we're getting good growth and all these kind of things. And then as we sort of started to peel back different elements of taking away everything else apart from the new client opportunity or creating behaviors that generate new client opportunity, we sort of found a really interesting sort of data point, which was it can be hidden in everything, and you actually have to look. You have to unpack, and you have to go, well, that doesn't make sense. Let's keep going, and let's take this out, and we got to some really, I would say, a really different outcome than if we would have just skipped over it and gone, yeah, that looks good, and off you go. And probably this is something that you've sort of brought to Juno and brought to me is you got to keep going. You got to be inquisitive, and you got to look, and you got to keep going and going and going and going. And so when we talk about the team, when we talk about accountability and role clarity and cultural drift, as you sort of start to dig down and dig deeper into that, it's about what are the data points that support all those types of things, and keep going. Because when you try to solve a problem that you have a somewhat idea versus exactly what problem you're solving, it's chalk and cheese. They're two completely different things. And then you can allocate the tasks and the performance on around exactly what you're trying to change.
And I think that comes back to clarity. And I mean, we use this word all the time. It's a gift that an owner of a business can give its team. And it's an underrated, is it underrated? I don't know. It should be something that every owner and leader aspires to do well, because done well, the rest changes.
Yep. Yep.
Because if there's a clear articulation of this is what we need to be doing, and this is the expectation that I set to deliver on that, this is the outcome that I want, and this is the consequence of outcome or non-delivery of outcome, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. It's a game changer.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think they're the three things that we start with. So again, we're getting back to the reason why the reset is so important is because it draws that line in the sand, start of the year. It can re-energize the business. We talk about the owner, the leaders. We talk about the business itself. We talk about the people in it. I thought that it'd be good to sort of run through a real life example, and I'll use one of, and again, I've just come off the back of multiple ones of this, and I really think about not just the reset itself, but I think about the sessions that we've had post the reset.
Yeah.
And they're really, really good.
And just for the clarity of everything, all our clients at Juno get a reset at the start of, within the first month, maybe for the first 6 weeks. And that's the importance that we place on this reset, which is there's no client that's not going to get a reset. Some get a little bit later for whatever, but we place a huge amount of importance, particularly with our clients, on doing this. And so this is part of our yearly cycle that we have, and you can't not have one is probably the long and the short of it.
And with that goes, we don't have a template that says that you have to do X, Y, Z in that reset, because there's a recognition that all of our clients are at different stages, they're at different maturity levels, and they need different things.
Correct.
What's not a non-negotiable for us is doing the reset.
Correct.
But it's tailor-made for all of our clients depending on where they're at and what they need. And so, I mean, again, this particular client, it's a partnership. So there's 2 owners in this business, and we did exactly what we've just said in terms of how did the owners perform? And I think that in itself is a challenging conversation, particularly when there's 2 in a business. It really is putting the spotlight on both of them as owners and deliverers in that business to go, how did you both go?
Yep.
Did you say and do what you said that you were going to do? What went well? What didn't go well? And that was a really robust, challenging conversation. And I think that people probably underestimate how hard that is.
Do you think that's? And I mean, I think we've talked about this before. The communication between the owners, do you think the lack of communication causes quite a robust conversation in those circumstances, because they probably haven't talked realistically about these things before, and where, as Juno, we're exposing is a terrible word, but we're bringing that up because that has to be talked about?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it gets back to having a third party involved that is objective and that is ultimately there to work with you and support you in your growth and the ultimate goals that you've set yourselves. is why I think we have those conversations really successfully.
Yeah, yeah.
And when we talk about why do people need advisors, for us, it's not just advisory; it's that implementation, execution piece as well. I mean, those sorts of conversations for me just really highlight the need for that third party, because I don't believe that it's a conversation that's easy, and therefore it doesn't really get done.
Correct.
So we had that conversation, and we had those whiteboards going, and we had all the things that we'd done well, which was a bit of a, come on guys, surely there's more that we've done well this year. And then there's the board that what didn't we quite nail?
Yeah.
What it then led into for this particular client was around the growth part of it. It's a really important piece for us. How did we go with that? Are your personal and professional goals still aligned to what we're doing? And I think that businesses that don't reset that piece frequently drift.
Yeah.
So for us, it was a really good piece to go, are our personal goals still the same? And
I'll just jump in. Another part, and I suppose for the context of this personal and professional goals, when we bring on a new client, we go through a
unpack.
We call it an unpack. It's kind of sort of like a strategic day. But we talk about a lot of things and, peel back the onion, blah, blah, blah. But one of the big things is understanding, and people find this incredibly difficult to do, and there's a lot of sort of coaching's maybe the wrong word, but there's a lot of bringing out some information, which is what are your personal goals and what are your professional goals? Because at Juno, we see them as completely intertwined. You cannot reach your personal goals if your business goals, aren't working, and vice versa. And so part of this is, and it's like the goals somewhat change over time. And the irony is that as the business grows and as you start to make, money, some of those goals change. And it's important to always go back to, we have the strategic day document. We always go back to that, particularly in these resets, refreshes, and goes, are we still aligned as partners, and are we still aligned with our both individual, personal and our professional goals as a business? Otherwise, we need to create change. And if you don't do that, what ends up happening is, and you've seen this before as well, is that the goals start to split, and then it's very hard to get them to come back together because you've drifted too far. You're far better to have these points at like these reset refreshes, which is regular enough so that they can't drift too far, and you can keep bringing it back to this is what we said, this is what we agreed to, and this is what we're aiming for.
Yeah, which was a great part of that session. And from that, it's like, okay, those professional goals look like this.
Yep.
Does the model still make sense? Are we on the right path? And we went through all of that in terms of there is going to be a slight change to that model, which was, again, a really great outcome of the reset. What was probably the most challenging part was the business owners actually acknowledging what they didn't do well. And we got to the point where we said we're going to set some non-negotiables this year. And this is a whole elevation step for this business, so that we've spent enough time with them for them to know now what's expected, and they're now ready to go, I want to step up.
And let's just jump into that elevation, because it's a really interesting one, and we're probably out of our own internal reset refresh, we've talked about the elevation and let's call it the business owner accountability maybe, and how as a business goes through this transition of let's just call it an A business stepping into a B business, the expectation of change and accountability on the business owner needs to step up with that. And that was something, ironically, that came out of our reset refresh, not with us, but with what we're seeing in the businesses that we're working with. And that's really challenging because business owners sometimes don't want to be held accountable. They're happy sitting there, but that comes, and we talk about the consequence. The consequence of that is we're not going to achieve your goals, and they would be the business goals. And then that waterfalls down into you're not going to achieve your personal goals. And so as we sort of progress forward and as your business grows and it progresses, there is and I know which client you're talking about, but there is an understanding and an expectation that there is more accountability required on those business owners. And for us, it's about, at Juno, we're sort of going forward and going, yes, that needs to be accountable, and we will help. Not that there's an accountability framework with what we do, but somewhat to keep the business owners on track so that they're achieving the goals that they said that they want to achieve.
Yeah, and I think in this instance, the business can't achieve what it needs to if they're not held accountable. So as challenging as that conversation was, and there was some real, do you really want to do this? Because this is what it takes.
Yep.
And I think that when you've got someone like us in that has this experience of, we're going to let you know what it's going to take to make this work. It's up to you ultimately if you want to actually do the work.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what's really motivating and energizing for us as a business is to get to a point where they go, and I'll use an exact example around the business owner going, I am not going to tolerate poor performance this year. Now, that's a huge outcome from that reset.
Yeah.
That is a mandate now that we will bring into every session that we have, because he set the line in the sand now to go, I see what doing that meant for my business last year, and I see what doing that, the standards that were non-existent as a result of not holding people accountable to poor performance and what that's done. And he goes, I don't want that anymore. And so that whole reset and the challenging conversations to get that out of it is huge, right? Because it then resets. And, you know, we've had a couple of sessions since that, and I just see the mindset shift, the realization of what I've got to do, and the energy that's provided them to go, I'm going again and I'm going to do a better job this year.
And I go, how many clients, and we could talk for days about this, but I go, how many clients say that, right? And then it sort of drops off and something happens and it's whatever. And I mean, this is this whole thing about, excuse me, the reset is only as good as your ability to consistently to implement and keep it consistency. Because the worst thing a business can do is, and I mean, there's probably 10 examples, but is to go, I'm going to do this, I'm going to draw a line in the sand, and you know, poor performance is not going to be tolerated. And then we get 2 months in, it's like, oh, well, you know, Susie, yeah, that's okay, but I'll join it, you know, because what that says to the business is it says to, I don't follow through with my decision making. And that becomes really tricky, right? Because then when you do another reset or whatever and you actually want to change, the business and the staff and the culture looks at that change and I mean, I've heard this so many times, oh, we always try these things, but nothing ever really changes. That is complicated to get through. You're better off making the right decision and following through whatever the consequences may be, because that will realign the business and that will realign your ability to move forward.
And I think we talk about, you know, it's all to your point, you know, we get into January and, there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of motivation going on. We're going to fucking nail it this year and we've done it. But, February rolls on and that's next week, right?
Correct.
And we go, what am I doing? And, again, I think about the power of this business, of what Juno does, and I go, that's just where we start to do our real work, right?
Yeah.
Setting the reset, I mean, challenging conversations is just the first part. And then, you know, the subsequent weekly catch-ups that we have, and there is that accountability framework. And I'm really excited. I mean, this one particular client that I'm talking about, really excited to see what's going to happen, because I feel like there's this shift. And I take that personally now to make sure that shift is embedded. And that's actually where the real hard work starts, right? Because we can write whatever we want on a fucking reset bloody whiteboard. Oh, I'm going to do all this, right?
Yeah.
But then I go, what does it actually take? And I'm sort of thinking about this, and, you know, when we do our own reset at the start of the year, personally and professionally, and I was listening to a podcast, I don't know, people that are familiar perhaps with Craig Harper, and he talks a lot about we can get people motivated, but motivation wanes, right? It doesn't matter how good you are at something, that motivation starts to sort of, we can't keep it going all the time. So, and I talk about this in businesses and I go, if we get the fundamentals right and we can create a foundation that's strong, it will survive when the motivation's not there. And that's what I say about to my clients, is to go, we've got to spend the time getting that right. So the reset is one part, but the embedding of that is the next part, which is the hardest part. And I go, how do we make sure that we execute well and it actually sticks? We talk about 4 things.
Can I just ask, just before we get onto that, for people listening that are business owners and they go, "Fuck, that sounds like too much hard work for me. I'm just going to keep paddling." What do we say to that?
I think that you can it's a choice. We say all the time, it's a choice about how hard you want to work in your business to get the result that you want. So I'll use this client as an example, very clear business goals and outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they're not prepared to do that work, I have those honest conversations and I say, you are not serious enough about wanting to get where you said you want to get to.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you can keep battling, but I would go so far as to say,
why are you doing it?
But also, if you're prepared to put the hard work in and engage a business like Juno, we'll get you there. We will often say we'll do whatever it takes to get you where you want to go, but that does take hard conversations and hard work, right?
And change.
Lots of change. And we often talk about this in terms of our own clients that we take on. We're not really interested in taking on clients that don't want to do the hard work and the change piece. They kind of go hand in hand. And we're not saying hard work means excessive hours, but hard conversations, seeking the clarity. Those sorts of things that are hard, you've got to do the hard work.
And I suppose it's interesting that we talk about that because we don't want to take clients on that don't want to grow and probably I would say more often than not they don't know the change required and that's probably why they're seeking our advice.
Yeah. But
what happens is like what we've been talking about, the passion and the effort, it goes in peaks and troughs. And I say this I use this as an example from a client very, very long ago. It was a husband and wife team. It was a relatively large business. And as the advisor and the implementer and the sort of the growth consultant, whatever you want to call us, in that business there was a morning where they probably brought a bit of their personal stuff to work. And I had planned quite challenging conversations in that day. And I walked in 2 seconds. I was like, tough, right? And it was really funny because it's like, I was going to get nowhere if I just brought the hammer down on that day. And so obviously I had to wait a couple of weeks and then came back. And I suppose for us, I look at it, yes, we have a lot of challenging conversations. Yes, we do all these kind of things, but the art is to do it when it gets the most impact, and it's not just hammer every single day because that doesn't work for us. It doesn't actually get our result that we're trying to get with the clients. And that's the uniqueness that we see that we bring is that we're all mature. We've all done it before. Most of us have had businesses. A lot of us have, obviously, all of us have been in CEO, GM sort of style roles in businesses. And you go, there's a time and a place. And this is where we laugh. We go, the time and the place to do this reset is the start of the year.
Yep.
Right. And that's the most effective. And, you got to pull your pants up and put your big boy jumper on or big girl jumper on and get on with it. I suppose the implementation is about that consistency and riding with the flows of the business to make sure that we're delivering on what we need to deliver, but at the most appropriate times.
Yeah, and I think that if we get into sort of what does it actually require, and I talk about this all the time, it's a consistent and disciplined approach, right? If you want the roller coaster ride, that's what creates the uncertainty, or you're in it 1 minute, you're out the next. And I find this a really challenging conversation with a lot of owners of businesses because it's not their normal remit. When we get to a point where I go, we've got to be disciplined about this and we've got to be consistent about this, I'm like, oh God, I just want to go into the sandpit and play a little bit more. And it is about the discipline of this. And if you want to execute well, we talk about 4 things. We talk about ownership. Someone has to own an outcome. And I always say it has to be one person.
Yep.
It can't be multiple people owning one outcome because it lends itself to, he said this, she said that, I thought she was doing it. Or as I go, if we can get to a point where every outcome has an owner, then we're a quarter of the way there in being able to execute well on the reset.
Totally agree. And I suppose and probably what sits before this, we've talked about this a lot, is clarity of communication. There is, I'll put my hand up. I've been terrible at this in the past, getting better, but have been terrible. Is is if you don't communicate something very clearly to someone with an expectation and a time period, and I'm sure there's like a smart goal analogy somewhere in there, but if you don't do that, you can't expect the outcome. I mean, we had a discussion this morning about some of these kind of things, and you go, the clarity of communication allows the ownership. And where people, I think, also get it wrong is that it's not the ownership itself, it's that people aren't, and people, I mean the owners, they're not clearly communicating exactly what they want from that person to give them the ownership. And we go, it's black and it's white. There's the grey in ownership is the complication. And it's not the, I would say, staff or people that you work with. It's not that they don't want to do it, but inevitably they're going to have other things that come as priorities. There's going to do, if you say that this is the priority, that's the priority, right? And, as we go down, the consequences for that, that sort of lies on a difference. But we can't stress enough the clarity that you communicate and what you communicate and the expectation that you're giving allows for the ownership.
And I think, and again, I was literally on the phone to a different client last night, and
for your 10-minute conversation.
Yeah, 10 minutes. I think that clarity piece is hard.
Yeah, really hard.
So, and I think part of and I was sort of almost, I mean, we don't talk about this as a superpower, but when I think about it, I go, it probably is somewhat, because that conversation and him trying to understand why his team are not doing necessarily what he needs them to do. And when he explained what it is that he was trying to get them to do, I go, I don't understand that. I'm a pretty intelligent woman and I don't understand what it is that you're actually asking.
Yeah.
And so once we'd had a further conversation and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to articulate back to you what I think you're telling me about what it is that you want that team to do.
Yeah.
And 45 minutes later, I was able to articulate what he actually wanted, but it was very different to what he'd told that team.
Yeah.
And so by the end of that conversation, he's like, oh, now I'm probably wondering why that team is not actually doing what I've asked them, because they actually haven't understood, because I haven't been clear enough.
Correct.
So, yeah, huge one. So we talk about ownership. Mm-hmm. We then talk about prioritization. That's the second part.
That's my favourite word.
And what happened, again, another client where that we had key priorities, there's 12 of them.
Yep.
I go, you can't do 12. You have to be able to work out your top three and what's going to shift the dial the most. And I think when they go, everything's equally important, no, they're not.
Well, nothing's important if everything's important.
Well, nothing's going to get done well.
Correct.
So you then have a decision to make. It's either we're going to hone the three things that we think can shift the dial the most, but if you don't have the discipline to do that, then you'll end up not doing anything well.
Correct.
So that's the second one. The third one, we talk about the whole rhythm and cadence of a business, and we talk about this a lot in terms of, what Juno does with our clients. If there's not that regular touch point, then it doesn't matter who owns something or whether there's a priority put on it. If there's no tracking, measuring, monitoring, then you won't get where you want to need to go.
I mean, we had a conversation I had a conversation quite recently with a client, and they were talking about their senior leadership team meeting, and they said it happens once a month. And I was like, well, what do you talk about? It's like, we talk about our projects and this and that. And I'm like, you and I and Juno, the ability to get the people running the units of your business together and make, decisions and drive whatever needs to be driven with that is a monthly conversation is just nowhere near enough, particularly for that business. Different sizes, I get that. And they asked, well, how often do you think I should have it? And they said, I go, weekly, and if it's really, really tough, break that down and have a little mini one twice a week. And we don't have the time for that. And I laughed out loud. I say, you can't afford to not have the time for that. Making that, and the rhythm is what we talk about, is what we're doing, what meetings we're having. And I suppose where I'm going with that is what the business owner doesn't understand is that weekly senior leadership team meeting is your ability as a business owner to communicate to the team that does the delivery so that they can communicate to their team. How can you not have that weekly? And I said it's a communication tool, and it's an ability to understand and to get your data points on a regular basis. If you're doing it monthly, you're already too late. Mm-hmm. You're 3 weeks to be able to not change something. Yeah. And he sat back and he was like, oh, yeah. maybe we should make the time. And I'm like, yeah, you should.
Yeah. And then the fourth thing we talk about, which is probably the one that businesses don't spend enough time in. So you can get those three things ticking along okay. But if you don't have a consequence to action, then you'll unravel the first three. And I think when businesses are prepared to say, this is my expectation, this is what the measure of success looks like, and this is a consequence if we don't meet it. And it sounds like a really negative word, so use whatever word you need to, but there has to be a follow-on to something not happening. And, again, I'm going to use this recent client. We've set some really clear next steps. I'm not calling them a consequence, but it's a next step. If we don't deliver this, this is what it will then lead to.
Yep.
And this is what then that will lead to. Now, you've got to be really careful about how you communicate that, because you want people to be motivated and engaged. And if all they see is there's a consequence if I don't get this right, then that's a negative connotation. So there is definitely a means to communicate that well, but people have to understand this is the expectation and this is what happens if we don't meet it.
And you have to be clear when you're communicating that. Otherwise,
really clear. So again, I was going to say, so the four things we talk about: ownership, prioritization, the rhythm or the cadence, and then the consequence of action.
I suppose we're a lot of people, and some of the questions that I always get asked, and I suppose it's different to different businesses, is how do you embed this? How do you execute it properly? Because it's, I understand that, I need to have this meeting and I need to talk about all these things and get some outcomes and blah, blah, blah. But when you talk about embedding, how do you actually embed? And I suppose the word that we always use internally is this sort of consistency. And the way that we set up our businesses is really around that weekly touch point that allows small changes and embedding. But if you're a business out there, how do you go, I want to make a change. I know what change it is. Functionally, I know what I need to do, but how do I embed that to the longevity of the business? Because it's a complicated thing to do by yourself, right? Hence, I suppose, why we exist. But if you were to give some advice to some business owners that are looking to change and looking to embed some of this change and not have a flash in the pan, as we say, what would you say the top sort of two or three things? Obviously, consistency is going to be the top one, but what would you say the top two or three things would be?
I think before I'd even start there is say, once you've got that willingness to change, so there's got to be that change mindset, you have to spend time.
Yep.
So this is not something that you can go, I've got 3 minutes now, I'm going to quickly come up with something and hope I can embed it.
Or ChatGPT.
You can use ChatGPT to get a basis of something. I think that there's some really good information out there. But the real key is enabling enough time to plan, but that can't be onerous. So it needs to be efficient enough to give you enough of a start. And you're right, it's the consistency. If you seriously said right now, I'm going to allocate an owner to a task. I'm going to be clear about the priority of that task. I'm going to ensure I meet every week with that person on that task, and I'm going to be really clear about the consequence if the task isn't met, and did that with just one thing consistently over, I'd say 2 or 3 months, you will see change. So if you're trying to do this on your own and you don't have someone like us on board, try one thing.
Yeah.
If you try and do everything, you'll do nothing. So just try with one.
Love it. Big conversations today, Sharron.
Yeah, I think this is all about the reset.
Yep.
This is about using the time to pause before you execute. And it's also for us, it's about the reset is just one piece. The execution and embedding is where the real gold comes in your business.
Yep. I suppose you got to start with the reset first though, right? So you got to do one. Well,
reset first, then execute.
Correct.
Yeah.
Good combos today, Sharron. Good work.
Welcome back.
Welcome back to you too. Should we have a little high five?
High five.